Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Ian Cyrus, and I'm going to be talking about an aspect of Buddhism that few people really talk about, and that is the secularization of the Dharma, or what we would call Buddhism. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how secular groups came into being. I've prepared a narrative here so that I don't meander all over the place. And I'm going to start with the definition or the etymological origin of the word secular, which actually means of this age or of this world. Now, it implies having no relationship or to religious or monastic practice. So it's aside from that. And we're going to look at the modern history of it and the Burmese beginning of secular Buddhism or secular Dharma. It actually began with U Ba Khin, who was born in Yangon during the British colonial rule in March of 1899. He passed the final high school examination, winning a gold medal as well as a college scholarship. Family pressures forced him to discontinue his formal education to start earning money. His first job was with a Burmese newspaper called The Sun. But after some time, he began working as an accounts clerk in the office of the Accounting General of Burma. In 1927, he passed the accounts service examination given by the provincial government of India. In 1947, when Burma was separated from India, he was appointed the first special office superintendent. In that same year, in January of 1937, U Ba Khin met a student of Saya Tet Gye. Tet Gye was a wealthy farmer and disciple of the well-known master Ledi Sayadaw, who taught him Anapanana Sati, a form of meditation taught by the Buddha. When U Ba Khin tried it, he experienced good concentration, which impressed him so much that he resolved to complete a full course in what we know today as Vipassana, or insight meditation, or what the term Vipassana really means is clear seeing. Meditation that Tet Gye offered at the center he had established for that purpose. Accordingly, U Ba Khin applied for a 10-day leave of absence and set out for Tet Gye's teaching center. U Ba Khin progressed well during the first 10 days course and continued his practice, doing frequent visits to his teacher's center and meetings with Tet Gye whenever he came to Rangoon. In 1941, a seemingly happenstance incident occurred, which was to be important in his life. While on government business in Upper Burma, he met by chance Webu Sayadaw, a monk who was widely recognized as an arahant, or what we know today as a bodhisattva, someone who has achieved a high level of awakening. Webu Sayadaw was impressed with U Ba Khin's proficiency in meditation and urged him to teach. The monk was the first to recognize U Ba Khin as a teacher. On January 4th, 1948, the day that Burma gained independence, U Ba Khin was appointed first accountant general of the Union of Burma. So now let's look at the birth of Vipassana, or what we know today as insight meditation. In 1950, he founded the Vipassana Association of the Accounting General's Office where lay people, mainly employees of that office, can learn Vipassana meditation. I'm talking about U Ba Khin again, okay? In 1952, the International Meditation Center was opened in Rangoon, 2 miles north of the Swidagon Pagoda. Here, many Burmese and foreign students received instructions in the Dharma from U Ba Khin. He was also active in planning for the 6th Buddhist Council known as Chata Sangayana, or the 6th recitation, which was held in 1954 through 1956 in Rangoon. Now let's look at the Indian beginning of secular Buddhism. It sort of began with Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, who lived between 1891 and 1956, also known as Babasabhe Ambedkar. He was an Indian jurist, economist, politician, and social reformer who inspired the Dalit Buddhist movement and campaigned against social discrimination towards what the Dalits were called, the untouchables. He was independent India's first minister of law and justice, and chief architect, actually, of the Constitution of India. Ambedkar was a prolific student, earning doctorates in economics from both Columbia University and the London School of Economics, and gaining reputation as a scholar for his research in law, economics, and political science. In his early career, he was an economist, professor, and lawyer. His later life was marked by his political activities. He became involved in campaigning and negotiations for India independence, publishing journals, advocating political rights and social freedom for the Dalits, and contributing significantly to the establishment of the state of India. In 1956, he converted to Buddhism, initiating mass conversions of Dalits. Now, the term Dalit, D-A-L-I-T, means broken or scattered. And these were a group of people who were like social rejects. That's why they call them that. But anyway, the Dalit Buddhist movement, also known as Neo-Buddhist movement, is a religious as well as socio-political movement among Dalits in India, which was started by Ambedkar. It radically reinterpreted Buddhism and created a new school of Buddhism called the Navayana school, or the new vehicle. It's actually a school of Buddhism that you rarely hear about, and that again is the Navayana, or new school. The movement has sought to be a socially and politically engaged form of Buddhism. And you see that reflected now in the Soka Gakkai, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, which is really a political movement. The movement was launched in 1956 by Ambedkar, when nearly 500,000 Dalits, formerly untouchables, joined him and converted to Navayana Buddhism. It rejected Hinduism, challenged the caste system in India, and promoted the rights of the Dalit community. The movement also rejected the teachings of traditional Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana traditions of Buddhism, and took an oath to pursue a new form of engaged Buddhism as taught by Ambedkar. In the Dalit Buddhist movement of India, Navayana, or the new vehicle, was considered a new branch of Buddhism, different from the traditional recognized branches of Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Okay. The Navayana new vehicle rejects many practices and precepts, such as renouncing monasticism, the monastic life, karma, rebirth, and an afterlife, samsara, meditation, enlightenment, i.e., the Four Noble Truths, considered to be the foundational doctrine in most Buddhist traditions. It radically reinterprets what Buddhism is, revising the original Buddha teachings to be about class struggle and social equality. Ambedkar called his version of Buddhism again the Navayana, or Neo-Buddhism. His book, and I think I have a copy of the book here, if I'm not mistaken. I can show you. This is his book. His book, The Buddha and His Dharma, is the holy book of the Navayana school. Followers of Navayana, or the new school of Buddhism, are generally called Buddhist, as well as Ambedkarites Buddhist. Okay, so it's named after him. Neo-Buddhist, and it rarely called Navayana or the new vehicle. Continuing on. He wrote this book that I just showed you in 1956, and this book became a part of the basis for the Indian Constitution. So this book, okay, the Buddha and His Dharma, became part of the basis for the Indian Constitution. It's amazing, right? Ambedkar's focus was primarily on the Four Noble Truths, not as metaphysical truth claims, but more as doctrine for social political justice, and as a means of achieving the quintessence of humanhood without subscribing to any of the monastic traditions. So now let's bring this in from Burma and India to the United States. Let's talk about John Kabat-Zinn, born John Kabat, born in 1944 as an American professor emeritus of medicine and the creator of the Stress Reduction Clinic and Center of Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare and Society at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. John Kabat-Zinn was a student of Zen Buddhism. His teachers were people like Philip Kapleau, Thich Nhat Hanh, and Song San, which my lineage came from Song San, and a founding member of the Cambridge Zen Center, which was one of the first actual Zen centers established in the US. His practice of yoga and studies with Buddhist teachers led him to integrate their teachings with scientific findings. He teaches mindfulness, which he says can help people cope with stress, anxiety, pain, and illnesses. The stress reduction program created by Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness-based stress reduction, also known as MBSR. I believe right here in Philadelphia, which is where I live and practice, just outside of Philadelphia, the Thomas Jefferson University Hospital has an MBSR program that is very, very good. And I know the people there, that's Dr. Diane, she runs the program there. So if you want to benefit from MBSR, or what's known as mindfulness-based stress reduction, call Jefferson. She has an institute there, and medical centers, hospitals, and health and maintenance organizations, and it's described in his book, that is John Kabat-Zinn, Full Catastrophe Living. Now, that's John Kabat-Zinn and his MBSR. Then there is the Insight Meditation Society. The Insight Meditation Society, or the IMS, is a nonprofit organization for the study of Buddhism located in Barre, Massachusetts. It was founded in 1975 by Sharon Salzberg, Jack Cornfield, and Joseph Goldstein, and is rooted in the Theravada School of the Elders. That's what Theravada means, tradition. Its first retreat center is an old mansion in Barre, Massachusetts, which was opened on February 14th, 1976. IMS offer Buddhist meditation retreats at two facilities, the Retreat Center and the Forest Refuge in rural central Massachusetts. The Retreat Center is one of two IMS centers in the United States. However, all of the centers teach Vipassana, which is insight meditation, whatever that is, okay? From 1996 to 2006, IMS offered a correspondence course developed by its founders, Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg, entitled Insight Meditation, which consisted of 12 audio cassettes and a workbook. The course later developed or evolved Insight Meditation, an in-depth correspondence course with 24 audio cassettes or CDs and an 88-page workbook. So Vasa is a basic practice for Buddhist monastics. During this 3-month retreat, monks seclude themselves and follow a tight regimen of meditation and Dharma study. Every year, the Insight Meditation Society runs a 3-month course that has been called Marathon Meditation. Save for tri-weekly interviews with instructors and nightly lessons, the retreatants observe full silence. The Theravada tradition, in the Theravada tradition, after lunch, they do not eat another meal, but are allowed snacks and drink tea, which is not all accepted by many Buddhists as proper practice. The center courses provide instructions and practice in Vipassana. But in my view, as a long-term practitioner of the Dharma, this whole idea of extended meditation, which is also you see it in the Zen school, I'm not totally on board with that. For one thing, my grounding in this thing came from a different source. And Sung San, he was not one for these extended meditation practices, and which is in the Korean tradition. There's a Dahui, which the Dahui letters, which we follow very closely. Dahui was not a big fan of meditation. As a matter of fact, he strongly criticized Bodhidharma for sitting in a cave for 7 to 9 years. He says, what a waste of time. Because it's not about how long you sit on your cushion and what the heck are you thinking about, right? Ice cream, the bills you didn't pay, or you manufacture things to think about. The real value of the Dharma is when you get off the cushion and you engage the world around you, and you do it in a particular way, with poise and dignity and respect and all of that kind of stuff. And the basis for those teachings is what my teacher often would say, moment to moment mind. Okay, so continuing on, Vasa, which in Pali means rains, and there's a reason why it means rains, because this 3-month retreat that monks often do now, for people who are practicing some form of the Dharma, as in the IMS group. This 3-month-long extended meditation or meditation marathon came about during the time of the historical Buddha, when there were monsoon seasons that lasted about 3 months. And there were typhoons and really bad weather and trees falling over and roads are flooded and what have you. And he basically told his disciples, look, sit your butts down in here and chill for 3 months. And I think that's where that practice came from, erroneously. So he did that as a matter of necessity, just to protect the lives of his followers. And he's like, so you sit in here and chill. He may have taught some things while they were doing that, but that became a formal practice. So the term vasa means rains. That's why it's named rains. The Buddhist monastic retreat observed primarily in Buddhist communities in Southeast Asia during the 3-month monsoon season period each year. The vasa has been largely forgotten in Mahayana Buddhism, especially those in China and Japan. Metta is a word used in the Pali language that has been translated variously as boundless friendliness, general benevolence, goodwill, and even loving kindness. Okay, that's the term metta. So when you hear about metta meditation, that's what they're talking about, is that you walk around being loving and kind to everyone, everything, kind of thing. The loving kindness part of it is probably the most common phrase you will find on the web. But I've seen scholars grind their teeth over this rendering, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean loving kindness. It's general benevolence, goodwill, friendliness, boundlessness, all of that stuff. All right. So let's go to another one of these secular groups. It's the Soka Gakkai, or the Value Creation Society. That's what Soka Gakkai means. The Soka Gakkai, meaning Value Creation Society, is a Japanese Buddhist religious movement based on the teachings of the 13th century Japanese priest Nichiren, or what is known as Nichiren Buddhism, as taught by its first 3 presidents, Sunisburo Makiguchi, Joshi Toda, and Daisuke Ikeda. So the current head of the Soka Gakkai is Daisuke Ikeda, and he's highly regarded. It is the largest Japanese new religions of the Japanese new religions, and claims the largest membership among Nichiren Buddhist groups. The organization bases its teachings on Nichiren's interpretation of the Lotus Sutra and places chanting the Lotus mantra, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, at the center of its devotional practice. In particular, chapters 2 of the Lotus Sutra itself, which has to do with expedient means, and chapter 16, which is the lifespan of the one thus come, referring to the Buddha himself. Okay, the movement was founded by educators Makiguchi and Toda, and on the November 18th, 1930, and held its inaugural meeting in 1937. It was disbanded during the Second World War, when much of the leadership was in prisons for violations of the 1925 Peace Preservation Law, right? And a lot of the leaders of the Soka Gakkai went to jail. After the war, it was expanded to a claim of 750,000 households, and in 1958 through explosive recruitment. held to be unprecedented in the Japanese media. Further expansion was led by its former third president, Daisaku Ikeda. According to its own account, has 12 million members in 192 countries and territories around the world. So that makes it the largest secular organization, or for what it's worth, Buddhist group in the world. Moving the group towards mainstream acceptance, the organization is still viewed with suspicion in Japan and has found itself embroiled in public controversies, especially in the first 3 decades following World War II. From 1952 to 1991, it was affiliated with the Nichiren Soshu, or the Nichiren Buddhist monastic group. Okay. Now, Komeito, a political party closely aligned with Soka Gakkai, joined the ruling government coalition in 1999. The leadership of the Soka Gakkai severed ties with Nichiren Soshu, becoming a secular movement. Okay, so I have some more comments here about it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Dalai Lama's view of some of this stuff. The Dalai Lama is a title given by the Tibetan people for the foremost spiritual leader of the Gelug, or Yellow Hat school. So the main Tibetan school, they're called Gelug, or Yellow Hat school of Tibetan Buddhism, is the newest of the classical schools of Tibetan Buddhism. In the 14th and current Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, who lived as a refuge in India, who now lives as a refuge in India, the Dalai Lama is also considered the successor in a line of tulkus who are believed to be incarnations of Ovalo, Kitesvara, or Kuan Yin, the Buddhist Sattva of compassion. Okay, so there you go. The Dalai Lama wrote a book, and which is why I'm mentioning him at all, which is I was surprised to find that. He wrote a book called Beyond Religion, A Secular View. He was inspired by Ambedkar's book, okay, The Buddha and His Dharma. All right, so since the time of the 5th Dalai Lama in the 17th century, his personage has always been a symbol of unification of the state of Tibet, where he has represented Buddhist values and traditions. All right, so those of us who have seen the Dalai Lama know what that is. So let's talk a little bit about the Dharma, because that's what this is all about, is different versions of the Dharma. What was unique about the Dharma was that it was beyond the current religious social menu, which at the time of the historical Buddha was Hinduism and Jainism. The Buddha refused to answer questions about metaphysical concerns such as reincarnation, karma, and realms of existence. He was not concerned about how things got to where it is, but more concerned about how to address the relevant issues through the lens of the Four Noble Truths in the here and now. Doesn't that sound like secular Buddhism? Okay. So, he compared this to a parable of a man who was shot by an arrow and bleeding to death, but won't allow a doctor to remove it till he knows the name of the person who shot the arrow and where it was from, the color of the feather on the arrow, etc. In other words, it doesn't really matter how things got there. The goal in the here and now is to remove it and treat the wound. And I will end there. So I would appreciate any comments that you guys have. Like I said, I created this narrative to avoid going off on tangents and rambling, because I have a tendency to do that. So if you guys who are watching this like my presentation, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Okay, so this will give me the incentive to do more. Namaste.